Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm going to be checking out Elsa in Act 6 and some of the cool things that she can do. And we're going to start off with a boogeyman of a fight, because this void with a long distance relationship, as we all know by now, is an absolute nightmare to go up against, because you do have to watch the hit counter. You do need to kind of like keep your distance or be able to shrug off the weakness debuffs from long distance relationship, meanwhile taking damage from all of it. And all in all, it's just a very annoying fight where there are not too many great counters for the guy. And Elsa is without a doubt one of the best counters, because she shrugs off all non-damaging debuffs every 2.6 seconds, and that significantly helps you to mitigate all the damage and the uptime of any single debuff. Sometimes you get rid of those void debuffs by crossing the 10 hit mark, but at the same time you also have to deal with those weakness debuffs, and we can see that Elsa is perfectly capable of shrugging them off. Yes, of course, you still take damage, but at the same point you are able to outpace the damage you are taking from void with the damage that you are putting up yourself. And even though it is a somewhat close race here, this is a rank 5 with no special masteries. I don't even have like glass cannon and stuff like that, and definitely don't have any boosts or suicides. Obviously suicides wouldn't quite work in this matchup, but point is, this isn't kind of like the highest damage output that Elsa could do even unboosted. And next up we're gonna look at this Spry and Gas lane. Now it is also quite an annoying combination, because every time opponents evade, you do get this fatigue debuff, I think they're called. Well, basically you get a debuff that lowers your crit chance, and whilst that debuff is active, you also lose all of your power, and you basically can't strike the opponent. But obviously Elsa not only is able to shrug those debuffs off, but she's also able to completely counter the weight of opponents, so long as they have evaded in the fight once. She switches her incinerate ammunition to cold snaps, and whilst opponent has cold snap active, they simply cannot evade. Now I will make a small slip up at some point in this fight, I think, or next one, where I will not be kind of quick enough to maintain my cold snaps, but at the same point we can see how many evades we have failed in this fight, and that Spider-Man is already at like 15%. Once you get that first cold snap going, you pretty much don't have to worry about any evade at all whatsoever from your opponents, and everything's working out, well, quite fantastic for you. And yeah, it was very simple, straightforward lane for a quite niche node combination. And now we're going to be going up against the Spider-Man again. I'm just going to wait till that debuff gets shrugged off by Elsa. Now, every time I do inflict the Behemoth Hellfire rounds, he's going to be inflicted with Cold Snap instead of Incinerate. And yeah, jobs are good, and pretty much you don't have too much to worry about. Just make sure to apply as many of your own debuffs as you can, and not get hit in the face while you're taking the opponent down. It's beautiful to see all of those evade failed. And Elsa is certainly a quite consistent evade counter. I don't think she's by far the best evade countering champion in the game, but she definitely has a very kind of like solid standing among them, because it is very easy to maintain throughout the fight. If I would have to name a weakness, is that you must have an opponent evade once at first, and that can be risky. But if you are playing carefully, you can relatively easily play around it. And yeah, here we can see that that Stealth Suit Spider-Man is definitely getting brought down extremely quickly without much problems. There I got saved by Quake's and Nick Fury synergy, which is probably going to be deserving another video on its own on how significantly it boosts Elsa, and arguably makes her one of the better kind of like auto quest champions. But yeah, so this fight is pretty much over. I'm also going to include another fight here on this lane against Ultron, just because I really did enjoy that fight, and it was quite fast-paced fight, where obviously I wasn't really waiting for that Ultron to evade, and I just kind of like went ham at him. He does evade at some point, which I think almost caught me, or did catch me, but at the same point we can see that all of those beautiful debuffs are going to work, and we're going to be able to neutralize his healing afterwards. We're just having a wonderful time bashing in at this Ultron, because obviously Elsa does gain a damage increase against large, extra large, and science champions. And I think in this fight is definitely quite significantly noticeable that we are managing to do quite a lot of extra damage on top of our debuff damage, on top of our crits, on top of everything else we are doing in the fight. And keep in mind that this is Act 6.3, so the opponents here are definitely stacked. And here just need to avoid that level 2 and apply a few more debuffs, go into a level 1, get that precision buff, why not? A whole bunch of red numbers floating about, that Ultron's healing is completely shut off. And yeah, the job's a good one. Another interesting thing, obviously we all know that Elsa's parry mechanic is really great to bypass stun immunity, which I actually forgot to showcase in this video. But it's also great for nodes like Do Not Go Gentle, for instance, and or Bane, because you can make sure that your parry counts as an intercept, which is quite significantly helpful in these Do Not Go Gentle matchups, because you do need to get rid of those passive counters that you get placed on you quite rapidly towards the end of the fight, and we can definitely see that it's super helpful. But just like Ghost, you do need to make sure the opponent actually dashes in at you, not that you're just parrying an attack when he is standing right next to you. That will not count as intercept. You need to make sure that the opponent actually runs in at you, just like you do when you get that phase intercept with Ghost. So at this point I actually have quite a lot of those counters. We can see that this parry got rid of 2 of them, and later on I'm going to have one example where I slow down and showcase it again, how this Elsa's evade mechanic works as an intercept and lets me get rid of a couple of these counters. That's supplemented with some of your heavy attacks, and or intercepts obviously makes this Do Not Go Gentle node much more manageable. So here we saw King Groot dash in, Elsa evade, and 2 of those counters completely disappeared, because instead of a parry in this case, you technically land an intercept. And that without a doubt would also be helpful for those ebb and flow intercept nodes, for instance, in Alliance War, which I actually hope I get a chance to try out at some point. But yeah, that would make those ebb and flow nodes significantly easier if you can land an intercept simply by doing a parry. So yeah, looking forward to trying that out at some point in future when I get the chance. But that will be it for this fight. We're going to move on to the next fight examples. And this would be 624 with that weird armor, where basically whilst that yellow shield is active, you cannot let your opponent touch you. And typically that would exclusively mean relying on intercepts or staying away from opponent, or yeah, that's basically it, or punishing special attacks. But thanks to Elsa's mechanics, obviously, you can use her evade to get an extra opening and therefore mitigate this node much easier. Now, I did make a mistake there. I did get clipped by the level 1. That level 1 is still a little cheeky guy. So instead of getting stunned, I chose to take some damage there and eat that power sting. But in a moment, we're going to definitely be able to showcase once again how helpful that parry mechanic is for Elsa, because she can just simply use it to gain an extra opening. Or we're going to be finishing the fight out before that. I don't exactly quite remember. Yeah, he went down before that. But it works. It works fantastic, and it's definitely helpful, kind of like an extra opening in the fight. An additional thing is, obviously, Elsa's damage quite heavily leans on utilizing damage over time debuffs, and her base damage is not the highest that we can see in the game. She does crit decently, but she doesn't have any super overpowered special attacks like, I don't know, Sunspot or Proxima or whoever. But often, obviously, in cases of Safeguard, in cases of Rage, that also can be helpful. We're going to see that we're going to finish this entire fight out without triggering Rage a single time, but the fight still is obviously going relatively quickly, because Elsa has easy access to precision buffs, easy access to damage over time effects, and overall she kind of is very wise diversifying his damage output. And typically I'm not the biggest fan when a lot of champions' damage output depends on like a specific damage over time debuff. But in case of Elsa Bloodstone, the fact that you can just kind of switch out Incinerate for Cold Snap in case the opponent is Incinerate immune, in my opinion, is definitely quite helpful. Obviously, there are opponents it's not going to work too well against, but for most part, the fact that she has that dual ammunition type definitely helps you bypass a lot of immunities and kind of like pick and choose your ammunition. And obviously, the effects that Incinerate and or Cold Snap bring to the table is really, really helpful. And next up, we're going to jump to 6.4, was it 5 or 6.44? Don't remember, but it's the pull, selective time stream, and flux dispersal. And once again, this is an extremely tricky node combination because you do not only need to find a champion that is capable of using projectile attacks frequently and deliver a lot of damage with them. In addition, you also need to be able to apply Incinerate or Shock in order to prevent opponents from healing back to full. And then obviously you do need to weave in your heavy attacks in order to make sure you deal any kind of substantial damage to your opponent. Now, heavy attacks, I'll be honest, in these showcase videos I sometimes kind of slightly forget about them. But the good thing is that Flux Dispersal node doesn't really affect damage you are dealing to your opponent with damage over time debuffs. And as I mentioned previously, damage over time debuffs represent quite significant portion of Elsa's damage. But Elsa's gunshots are all projectile attacks, which definitely kind of like improve Elsa's damage output in these type of situations, as well as her special attacks largely rely on projectile attacks. As you can see, bullets are flying and all of them are projectiles. And not to mention that it's extremely easy to maintain Incinerate and or Cold Snap debuff on opponent much throughout the entire fight, especially if you mix up both of the bullet types well enough. Then you can see that since the beginning of the fight, the opponent has always been under Incinerate effect, or yeah, well, in this case, Incinerate effect. And that obviously completely bypasses selected time stream. So once again, a quite niche scenario where not too many champions would and do perform well. Elsa manages to find a way with all of those little niche things how to cover these matchups extremely well. Keep in mind that these guys are absolutely jacked, that parry, stun, evade helps you reduce some of the block damage you would otherwise take. And yeah, we can see that Incinerates are always up. He's not healing. You're dealing a relatively decent to good amount of damage considering you have to play around selective time stream. And the fight is straightforward, simple, easy, not too troublesome. And the last fight I'm going to showcase in this video is going to be on the same lane against Howard the Duck. And Howard the Duck is a champion that is marked with the large tag, so obviously Elsa does gain some damage benefit against large champions as well, and that is going to help her finish on this fight even quicker. And yeah, we can definitely see that Elsa is not just kind of like a vanilla fun champion. She actually does have significant uses in Act 6. I'm not trying at any point to say that she is the best for all of these things, or that she is I don't know, the most kind of like deserving champion of your catalyst. But the point of this video is to showcase that if you do entrust your tier 5 basic catalyst to Elsa, she will definitely be able to kind of like pay off your investment into her, and you will be able to use her in actual very difficult endgame Act 6 type of scenarios, as well as I certainly have noticed myself that we are seeing more and more nodes that place non-damaging debuffs on yourself in Alliance War and Alliance Quest. In Act 6, we frequently see all of these fatigue debuffs, weakness debuffs, power sting debuffs placed on you. Same thing for Alliance War, and my expectation is to see more of this type of nodes in the future as well. And with that, obviously, Elsa is just going to become more and more relevant in my personal expectations of what are we going to see from Kabam, because they seem to be leaning more and more towards all sorts of detrimental effects being placed as debuffs on you. Obviously, sometimes they are passives, which also doesn't quite work. Well, doesn't work, but as long as they are active debuffs, obviously Elsa is always a champion to kind of like keep in mind as somebody who can get rid of all of these detrimental effects that Kabam seems to be in love with recently. Because yeah, if you scout 6.2, 3, and 4 lanes, you will frequently see power stings placed on you, fatigues, weaknesses, power locks, all of these nodes that short burst, lockdown, or whatever that make you start with heal block, that make you start with power lock. All of them are absolutely fantastic for Elsa because she can ignore or largely ignore them. But yeah, that will be pretty much it for today. I believe I have done fairly decent case showcasing Elsa in Act 6 exclusively, because I think that is one of the best kind of like judges of a champion's viability. But anyways, if you like the video, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya.